The Xfinity 5-year price guarantee. You get 5 years of the most reliable Wi-Fi with our best equipment included for a price that stays exactly the same.
Hi, everyone. Welcome back to Inquirer Live at Gameday Central, sponsored by Xfinity, alongside Jeff McLane. I am Olivia Reiner. We are both coming at you live from the Lincoln Financial Field press box as we get set for the divisional round matchup rematch between the Los Angeles Rams and the Philadelphia Eagles. Jeff, how you doing?
I'm great, Olivia. Good to be here. It seems like these first 3 games that the Eagles have played, they're teams that we know very well. Cowboys, obviously, NFC East, but the Chiefs have been a team the Eagles have played a lot over the last 5 years, and now the Rams seem to be kind of a new age rival for the Eagles after them matching up twice last year in the regular season and the divisional playoff round, as you mentioned. And it seems like the Rams are kind of geared up for this one. They have made no secret about it. They want to beat the Eagles.
Last week was the Super Bowl rematch, of course. However, I think I am arguably more interested in this rematch just given how that game ended between the Rams and the Eagles almost just 7 months ago. I think it was 7 months to just a couple of days ago exactly. So before we get into our conversation today about today's game, just a reminder for all of you watching at home, you can be a part of our conversation. If you're not already, head on over to inquirer.com/Eagles Game Day. You can leave us a comment or a question down in the chat. Also, if you're over on YouTube, Facebook, X, wherever you're watching us from today, you can leave us a question down in the chat as well, and we will answer some of those questions throughout our show today. All right, Jeff, if there is a lasting image in my mind from the divisional round playoff game that we just discussed, it is Saquon Barkley sprinting to the end zone through the snow and racking up those touchdowns. He had 4 explosive touchdowns between that playoff game and, of course, the regular season game as well. And even though Barkley said he is not focused on his performance from those last 2 games last season, the Rams spent all offseason trying to address how Barkley gashed them on the ground. They bulked up their run defense. They signed defensive tackle Poona Ford. They added a starting inside linebacker in Nate Landman, just so they can make sure that that never happens to them again. So now we're going to see the fruits of their efforts in the offseason in today's game. The Rams have been very successful in limiting the run. Of course, they haven't faced the type of running back that Saquon Barkley is, the caliber of running back that Saquon Barkley is. They haven't allowed a run for more than 15 yards yet this season through 2 games. With that being said, Jeff, do you feel like the Eagles could get Saquon Barkley going on the ground given what they were able to do last year?
Barkley is equipped to go at any time. I think Kevin Patullo said last week to us that he felt there were a few runs that, if he had just gotten through that second layer, that he would have been off to the races, and we know how that typically ends for Saquon Barkley. Coulda, woulda, shoulda. They have to go out there and do it again, or have to go out there and finally do it in this third game, because right now they're lacking in explosive plays. And typically you get that in the pass game, but the template for the Eagles last year for most of the season was to get the explosives on the ground. And that's what really opened things up for them through the air. And so far this season, that's been an issue for them on offense. Barkley had some really good runs last week, tough runs. I would say the same thing against Dallas, but the way that they played with their formations in terms of 12 and 13 personnel and a lot of inline formations, it allowed for the opposing defenses to stack the box and really kind of focus their attention on stopping Barkley. And I'd imagine the Rams are going to do some of that. I don't think it'll be over the top because, defensive coordinator Chris Schuler runs kind of a Vic Fangio type scheme. And Vic is okay with taking runs against light boxes if it helps the back end. It's a numbers game for these defenses, and I don't think they'll sell out to stop Barkley. But look, based upon what the Eagles have done through the air, it behooves most defenses right now to just kind of focus their attention on stopping Barkley. I'm not talking even about what happened last year. I'm talking about what's happening right now, and we'll talk about that in a little bit. But the Eagles' recipe for success these last few years have been getting Barkley going on the ground, so I don't see it being any different this week.
You mentioned it, Jeff. The Eagles have really struggled to generate explosive plays through the first 2 games of the season, not only on the ground, but also through the air. And in today's game, like most games, the Eagles' success in the passing game is going to start in the trenches. And if you love good O-line play, good D-line play, there's probably no better game to watch this weekend than this matchup between the Eagles and the Rams, particularly the Eagles' offensive line and the Rams' defensive line. The Rams' defensive front is really strong just across the line, but I'm really interested in watching those two guys on the edges, Jared Verse and Byron Young, not to be confused with Eagles defensive tackle Byron Young, but Young in particular has had a really strong start to his season. He's had 3 sacks, 4 quarterback hits, and he's forced a fumble on a strip sack. 2 of those sacks came last Sunday in the Rams' 33-19 win over the Tennessee Titans. I think a big difference maker, of course the Eagles offensive line is a strong unit to begin with, but a big difference maker in terms of the pass blocking aspect of this game is going to be the fact that Dallas Goedert is coming back after sitting out last week due to a knee injury. So they get their strongest tight end all around back, but also especially in terms of his ability to block. When you look at this matchup, Jeff, what is the key to keeping the Rams' very potent, very successful defensive front at bay, a group that had a lot of success in that divisional round game last year?
Yeah, 7 sacks in that game. Now, the weather conditions probably had something to do with that. And I think that, Jalen Hurts really struggled in that game because of the snow. It seemed like it affected him more than it did Matthew Stafford. But look, in the first game, they only gave up 1 sack. And, look, I'm gonna put my stock on on Lane Johnson and Jordan Mailata against almost anybody. But as you mentioned, Jared Verse and Byron Young are 2 of the better young edge rushers in this league. I was talking to Lane Johnson about this past week, and he knows Verse very well. A lot of speed to power pass rush moves. But he was really talking up Byron Young. He said he's really taking a leap in this next season. And those guys will flip sides every now and then. So that'll be a battle for both Mailata and Johnson. We'll talk a little more about the interior, but Braden Fisk is going to be active, and he's a handful in himself. Puna Ford was added. Tyler Davis is another strong guy that they bring off the bench. So Kobe Turner, of course, is a good pass rusher. So they have the horses up front, and that's the key to their defense. I don't know as much about how they are in the back end, and we'll talk about that a little bit. But if that rush can't get home, and Jalen Hurts has some time, it could open up the passing game for the Eagles.
I would say overall through 2 games, the offensive line has fared well at keeping Jalen Hurts clean. The issue has been getting those receivers open. That has been a glaring issue, and that is the big question in today's game, is this Eagles passing game finally going to start to get going? A.J. Brown, I found this stat very interesting over on Next Gen Stats. He's been targeted on just 19.1% of his routes this season. That's just 9 routes out of 47 run, which is over 10 percentage points lower than his target rate of 29.9% last season, which was the 4th highest rate among wide receivers. We have discussed this time and time again, Jeff. If A.J. Brown's not getting the ball in his hands, this offense isn't as good as it could potentially be. The silver lining to this game today is the fact, certainly not for the Rams, but for the Eagles, is that their top cornerback, Akella Witherspoon, is dealing with a broken clavicle. He was placed on injured reserve, and that could mean that Emmanuel Forbes, who is a longtime foe of A.J. Brown, could potentially be getting the start in today's game. Brown had a lot of success against Forbes when he was starting with the Commanders just a couple of years ago. So how do the Eagles try to take advantage of some of the deficiencies that the Rams may have in the secondary? But mostly, how can the Eagles have just some success again in the passing game if they are continuing to see zone coverage, which has been a really popular theme for the first 2 games of the season?
Yeah, look, they have some matchup advantages in the secondary. I mean, they should every week with A.J. Brown and Devontae Smith. They just haven't taken advantage of them. Part of it has to do with teams playing a lot of zone against them. I mean, look, just because the team plays you zone doesn't mean you can't complete passes. It does allow for a little more bracketing and keeping the Eagles from getting explosive plays off downfield because they're playing 2 deep high safeties, and that makes it harder on A.J. Brown, who really hasn't been targeted deep or on intermediate routes for that matter. In fact, I don't think he's really run as many as he normally has. Some of that has to do with the overall inefficiency of the offense. They haven't just been able to get things going, and they've kind of forced it, I thought, a little bit in throwing downfield early last week. And in fact, Jalen Hurts and both Devontae Smith said the same thing. Maybe Jalen could have taken a couple shots, but he didn't. I still feel like it's a little more on Kevin Petula, play design, play calling, than it is on the receivers or Hurts at this point. Forbes, as you mentioned 2 years ago, AJ took advantage. I mean, there's a huge disparity in terms of size. I think AJ's 80 pounds on him, and he probably isn't 180 pounds soaking wet. So there are opportunities just to throw it up to AJ. That typically comes in man coverage. And as you mentioned, I think the Cowboys didn't even play one man-to-man defense play in the opener. Chiefs, when they sent their zero blitzes, obviously that puts them in man situations. But other than that, it was a lot of zone. And, the Rams are going to be, cover 3 type team. They'll throw some cover 4 in there. I don't think that Shula blitzes a lot. Again, go back to that Fangio template. But he will send horses every now and then. He'll send the slot corner on occasion. So it'll be interesting to see how Kevin Petula attacks this pass defense coming this game. But, if they do get man situations, it certainly plays into the strengths of A.J. Brown and Devontae Smith.
Absolutely. On the other side, of course, is also going to be a matchup to watch between the Rams receiving core and the Eagles secondary, especially because this is somewhat of a new look Rams receiving core. No longer is Cooper Kupp a part of the equation. Davante Adams, the 32-year-old receiver, is now in the mix, and he had a really strong Week 2 performance against the Tennessee Titans. Kind of showed flashes of a younger Davante Adams that I covered back with the Green Bay Packers. He caught 6 of his 13 targets for 106 yards and a touchdown. Of course, Puka Nacua is also still a part of that really talented receiving core. He's their main motion man. He's capable of lining both up in the slot and on the outside. They've got a couple of really capable tight ends as well in Tyler Higbee and Davis Allen. He leads the team in touchdowns. When you have an offense, Jeff, that utilizes a lot of motion, but also uses a ton of play action as well, how do you think that might stress the various levels of the Eagles defense?
Yeah, communication is going to be key for those guys. Especially those middle field defenders, Cooper DeJean, inside linebackers, Zach Bond and Jahad Campbell. Look, the speed's there, the explosiveness. I mean, they can handle it, but they're also going to have to tackle in space. Sean McVay likes to get the ball into Puka Nacua's hands and let him do what he can after the catch, jet sweeps, screens. They'll throw a lot of passes underneath to him. And as you mentioned, he lines up a fair amount in the slot outside. So I don't think he'll be the guy if they do have Quinyon Mitchell shadow a certain receiver. I don't think it'll be Nacua. I think it'll probably be more Davante Adams. If they go in that direction, they may not. They may just kind of split it up and let the chips fall where they may with Adoree Jackson on the other side. Adoree had a better outing in Week 2 than he did in Week 1. So that, the Eagles probably should feel a little better about that. I think it could be exposed at any moment. There were a couple busts late in that game against the Chiefs. It seems like Blaine could have been sprinkled around to various parties on that. We haven't talked about Drew Makuba, who had a really kind of a breakout game last week. Big interception. That was kind of more Johnny on the spot, but he had other plays, really a nose for the ball, made tackles at the line of scrimmage, coming up from the post. There were some not so great moments, but certainly flashed and showed that he has the ability to play at this level. So, look, Stafford, and I know I'm trying to set you up here a little bit, but Stafford has as much arm talent as anybody in the league, and he now has 2 receivers that can really do it. I'm not saying that Cooper Kupp couldn't get it done, but he was certainly declining in terms of speed and separation. And I think even at the age of 32, Davante Adams can get separation downfield.
Got a comment from M. Galante over on Inquirer.com/Gameday Central. They say that the closing speed of Zach Bond, Jahad Campbell, and Cooper DeJean on short passes will be the difference maker on Sunday. I think that's a good point. Those are 3 incredibly talented, incredibly capable athletes in coverage. DeJean, it seems like he's made an open field tackle in just about every game, but the 3 of them, I think, are going to be a huge part of whether or not this Eagles defense is able to have success against these Rams receivers. I've also got a question on Facebook over here from Andrew Bagley. Andrew wants to know if Adoree Jackson is a long-term concern. Jeff, you kind of already discussed Jackson. He had a better game in week 2 against the Kansas City Chiefs. I think it's safe to say that the Chiefs right now do not have better receivers than the Dallas Cowboys, and Jackson certainly got exposed. He's about to potentially see some talented receivers here today. Is this the game that Jackson, this could be it? Is this he needs to prove his stuff now or forever hold his peace and they move on from him after this? How do you view this game for Jackson?
Yeah, well, and look, the fact that they stuck with him after week 1 kind of suggests that they may be in this for the long haul. Look, you don't want to be making changes haphazardly during the course of the season, and I'm not sure what, the few times that Jackson has kind of had to leave games with injuries, Ja'Cory Bennett's kind of had to jump out there and hasn't really fared well. I mean, that's kind of a small sample plays, but I don't know if they really have a better alternative. They've kind of moved on from the idea of Keely Ringo being an starting outside cornerback on this team. So it's really right now either going to be Adoree or Ja'Cory Bennett. Wouldn't rule out Howie Roseman doing something at some point. But last week was important for Jackson. And look, he's done it. He's got almost 90 career starts in the league. I do think that the speed just isn't there as much, and you're worried about him playing soft a lot. And I think that's, if you're looking at Matthew Stafford and the way he plays and how quickly he can get the ball out against those soft coverages that Jackson gives the receivers, I think that's going to be a target for that quarterback today.
We've already discussed Matthew Stafford a little bit, Jeff, but let's talk about him a little bit more, because even at 37 years old, he is still among one of the best pocket passers in the league. He leads the league with an 85% completion percentage when he is not under pressure. If you give him all the time in the world, he is able to get the ball out quickly and accurately to his receivers, according to Pro Football Focus. But that changes when he is under pressure. His completion percentage drops to 45.5% when he is under pressure. It is going to be imperative for the Eagles' defensive front to generate some of that pressure and put Stafford under duress in order to ensure that he can't get the ball out quickly and effectively. He is a real master at getting the ball out quickly to his first read. So, of course, the secondary is also going to play a role in taking that away as well. If you think back to the NFC, the divisional round game when Jalen Carter, I mean, he was arguably for the Eagles the reason why they were able to win that game was because of the way that he was able to generate pressure on Stafford. He had a sack on third down as they were driving down the field, and then generated a pressure as well on fourth down. When you look at the Rams offensive line, where do you feel like some of the deficiencies may be that the Eagles could potentially take advantage of as they're looking to get to Stafford?
Yeah, Stafford gets the ball out quicker than any quarterback in the league so far through 2 games, 2.45 seconds. But as you mentioned, when he's under pressure, he's a little bit of a sit and duck. He doesn't have much elusiveness, never really has, but at age 37, it is harder for him to kind of maneuver in the pocket. And if he has to work on to that second or third read, that allows the Eagles front to get home. And Jalen Carter has the quickest path to the quarterback, and in both games in which the Eagles have played the Rams, he's taken advantage of those matchups up front in the NFC Championship. In the divisional playoff game, as you mentioned, that those late rushes that Carter had were key to winning that game. Now, that didn't come against the starter. Coleman Shelton was out. He went up against Bo Limmer. Shelton is ready. He's healthy and ready to go. I don't think that he is among the top tier centers, so there are opportunities there. Rob Havenstein has been a veteran, reliable right tackle for the Rams, but he has struggled a little bit early in the season, so there could be opportunities on the edge to get around him. Real quick on Carter, though, those rushes came very late in the game, and he was playing like with 90-something% of the plays that game. And as Vic Fangio pointed out after the game against the Chiefs, the first one for Carter after getting ejected in the opener for obviously the spitting incident, he says he needs to get into shape. And I see kind of a flip side to that, like, why are you playing him 80+% of the snaps if you don't feel like he's in shape? But they need Carter to play that amount. It could just take a little time here. Sometimes it does for guys on the bigger side. He did miss some time in camp because of the shoulder injury. That shoulder injury hasn't gone away. He had a wrist issue during the last game, said it was no big deal, played through it. But Carter, certainly, it's something to watch, not only his conditioning, but these nagging injuries that he seems to have.
certainly something to keep an eye on in today's game. All right, Jeff, we've discussed a lot of different players so far on our show. If there's one player that you are really interested in and how they're going to fare in today's game, who would it be?
I'm going with Tyler Steen. We haven't really talked much about Steen, and that's a good thing for him because that tells you that he's off to a good start at right guard. A lot of questions coming in the season whether he'd be able to step into the shoes of Mekhi Becton and fill that that lone starting spot on offense that the Eagles had to replace. And I think Steen has done a very solid job. He's gotten stronger. He isn't as susceptible to the power moves as maybe he was in the past. But he's going to face a really good interior line here against the Rams. We mentioned it briefly. Braden Fisk is going to be active. There was a question whether he'd be able to go. Another one of the young guns that they have up front. Very quick off the ball, explosive. Certainly, the Eagles can slide over help from their center. I think the other issue, aside from Steen, is Landon Dickerson and this back or the knee or whatever it is that Landon Dickerson's dealing with right now. He says he's fine. He downplayed it all this past week when we finally spoke to him. He spoke a little bit. It's the first time we really actually honestly spoke to him since he had the knee surgery during training camp. And that is kind of, that's his ways, Landon Dickerson, but he has not been performing, if you ask me, at the level that we're typically accustomed to. And that could be an issue if Cam Jurgens is helping Tyler Steen. How's Dickerson doing on the other side, one-on-one?
We've got a comment here over on Inquirer.com/Eagles Game Day from Eric Byrne WY. As it relates to this offense, they want to know if the Eagles are going to have to be a pass first, run second to open up their offense. And of course, we know the Eagles, no one ran the ball more than the Eagles last season in the league. And that was such a huge part of their success, is not only just getting Barkley going, but of course having the threat of the run, the threat of not only Saquon Barkley being able to run the ball, but of course Jalen Hurts. If that's not working, I suppose Eric wants to know if reverting more to the passing game is the way to go. But I don't think that we've seen enough from the passing game to really have confidence that can carry the offense either. Where do you feel like the Eagles' identity will ultimately end up?
Well, I mean, it's going to depend upon what the defense is doing, right? I mean, you can't force the issue in throwing the ball. I think in today's modern NFL, you want to actually use the pass early and then get ahead that way and then pound them on the ground. The Eagles kind of, have flipped the script or did last season. And really, honestly, since Jalen Hurts has become the quarterback, I would like to see more design quarterback runs for Jalen Hurts. I'd love to see more zone read, more RPOs, more of those traditional draws that we see Jalen break open into the second level, score touchdowns on. We just haven't really seen much of that. And I think that dynamic you can't get away from because it adds so much. It creates space for Saquon Barkley. And, look, this should be an offense catered to Jalen Hurts. It's not about your scheme or, your play calling. And Kevin Petullo's talked about this. He says this is how he approaches it. But I think they have to back their words up and run the scheme more to cater to the strengths of the quarterback and the guys they have out there on the field.
Thank you, Eric, for your question over on Gameday Central. I want to flip it over to the defense for my player pick, and I'm going to be laser focused on Za'Darius Smith in today's game. We got to see his Eagles debut just more or less a week into being on the team last week against the Kansas City Chiefs. Now Smith will have had some time to learn the rest of the playbook. When I talked to him in the locker room after the game, he was like, yeah, I learned like a little bit just to make sure I knew what I was doing out there, but now I need to get back into the playbook and get everything else under my belt. So I'm curious to see if he plays a little bit more in today's game. He played 20 snaps in his Eagles debut, registered a half sack with Drew Makuba. But what was really intriguing to me was that he was really solid for the Eagles in run defense too. He had 3 stops in the run game, including one for a loss of 2 yards, another for a loss of a yard, and one right at the line of scrimmage. And for someone who is coming in really as like a designated pass rusher to also be able to get that run defense element in his game as well, and for that to shine through in his debut with the Eagles, I think is a great addition. He's been a good addition from a leadership perspective too for this young Eagles pass rushing core, and I'm eager to see now that he has had more time, 2 weeks into his Eagles tenure, will he be able to continue to make an impact on this team going forward? So he is someone who I am eager to see play. All right, Jeff, time to whip out the crystal ball and to look into the future. We have been fairly successful in predicting these Eagles scores this season, mostly because the Eagles have been winning a lot. It's easy to pick the Eagles. However, this is a really talented Rams team. This might be their biggest challenge of the season yet. What is your final score prediction for today's game?
Olivia, I was wrong last week. I picked the Chiefs.
Oh, excuse me.
Okay, we won't bring that up.
I've been flawless.
Look, as I tell all my readers for many years, I'm a pretty good reporter. I'm not a very good predictor. That being said, I will make my prediction here. We've talked a lot about most of the main concerns, matchups, etc. One thing that we haven't really brought up is Kyron Williams and the Rams' run game. Sean McVay is, a traditionalist in some ways. I mean, he likes to use the run to set up his pass. He wants to get things going on the ground. We saw in that first game that the Eagles played the Rams that they had success doing that. The issue was Kyron Williams had a terrible fumble early in that game, and he had a bad fumble in the second half of the playoff matchup. And the Eagles have won the turnover battle, not only in the 2 games against the Rams last year, 3-0, they are winning the turnover battle this year. And that's kind of what they've been able to hang their hat on because the offense has not been performing at a high level. And that will be a key factor, I think, to this game. Again, it's pretty easy to say, whoever wins the turnover battle typically wins the game. But that's, been a big focus of Nick Sirianni for all 5 years that he's been here. It's been a strength of this team. I wouldn't be surprised to see those guys that we mentioned earlier, Cooper DeJean, Zach Bond, and Jahad Campbell, going after the ball and going after it specifically when Kyron Williams has it. He's a good running back. He's not really got game-breaking speed, but he churns out tough yards. And I'd be focused on how the Eagles handle him early in this game to see how the rest of the game will play out. We did briefly mention the return of Dallas Goedert, and I think that will be a huge factor for this team, not only in terms of the blocking, because Grant Calcaterra and Kylan Granson just really haven't been up to snuff. We'll see how much 12 personnel they'll use. In fact, I would get away from that because Grant has really been struggling as a blocker. But Dallas, really kind of opens things up in the middle of the field. And I think that's somewhere that you can see Jalen Hurts going. I think, despite all the question marks about the Eagles defense coming into the season, having to replace 5 starters, Vic Fangio's unit has really kind of come together early here. And I think they'll have a successful game against the Rams. I don't feel 100% confident about this. I feel like, there's certainly a great probability that the Eagles will lose this one to a Rams team that is gung-ho on beating the Eagles. But home game, the Eagles have won here. Was it 11 straight? They've won 18 of their last 19 games for the best stretch in team history. So I'm going to go with the Eagles, 23-20.
Listen, it is tough to pick against the Eagles, and Jeff, you make a really great point about the turnovers. I think this has been a very boring Eagles team in a good way, in a way that has them winning football games. They're not turning the ball over. They're not pushing the ball down the field. They're kind of killing these teams death by 1,000 cuts, a lot of short passes, a lot of tush pushes in that game against the Chiefs, and I think it has perhaps upset a portion of the national football fan base, not so much maybe Eagles fans who are just happy to see the team win, but it's the way that they've been winning so far. Will it be sustainable? That has been the big question. Will the Eagles continue to protect the football the way that they have been? Of course, who knows? However, I have my reservations that this is going to be a win for the Eagles. I've got a 28-27 final score with the Rams closing that narrow victory. I mean, it's a tough game, and it's a little bit of a toss-up, but at the same time, this is such a tight game in the divisional round. The Rams have made some really intriguing additions to try to get them over the edge, to get them over the top. I know the Eagles aren't necessarily focused on last year, but every team that is going to play the Eagles this year, this is the defending Super Bowl champs in their mind, and this was the team that the Rams lost to in the divisional round that squash their Super Bowl aspirations. So I predict we're going to see a very hungry Rams team in today's game. This is a really talented defensive front. This is a very talented receiving core. It's a very talented quarterback going up against an Eagles defensive front that hasn't generated a ton of pressure through the first 2 games of the season. So I have a lot of question marks for the Eagles. We'll see if they are able to come up with the win, but I'm going with the Rams for this game. We'll see if my hot streak of of going 2-0 to start the season if that comes to an end in today's game. Regardless, this is going to be one of the most exciting matchups, I think, of the season. So I hope you're all just as excited as we are. All right, everyone, that is going to do it for us on Inquire Live at Gameday Central, sponsored by Xfinity. Thanks again for joining us. Just a reminder, head on over to inquire.com/Eagles Game Day if you're not already over there. We will be chatting with you throughout the game in real time, answering your questions. So if we didn't get to your question today, don't worry about it. We will definitely see you over there in just a little bit.
And if you want even more Eagles insight, check out my podcast, Uncovering the Birds, where I take you behind the scenes each week with exclusive reporting, interviews, and everything you might have missed. We now have a weekly day after podcast where I talk to one of my Inquire colleagues about the game, instant reaction that we get to you right after the Eagles Rams this week. You can listen to Uncover the Birds wherever you get your podcasts, or go to inquire.com/podcasts.
Once again, everyone, that is all for us today. Thanks so much for joining us, and we'll see you next time.